So today I'm going to look at total US expenditure on food. Just kind of walk through an exploration into like how I decide which graphs are useful for which types of data. And I was playing around with the different types of graphs and I was like, oh, this is actually something that would be good to talk about. So let's just dive into it. What I'm going to be doing is getting the data from the USDA Economic Research Service, get a lot of my data from the government or from official sources. Maybe that makes me a useful idiot. I don't know. According to the USDA, the U.S. spent 2.6 trillion on food in 2023, and to the credit of the U.S. empire, we have some pretty good looking charts. I think this is actually a pretty useful website. Earlier, I mentioned that we're going to be focusing on U.S. food and how us as Americans spend our food. This is basically a concept called the food dollar. And the food dollar is just a way to decide how that money breaks down into all the different categories. So, for instance, 13.2% of US spending was on food processing, 4.3 was on energy, etc., etc., etc. Who's etc.? What I did was copy the data from the food series chart, put it in a Google Sheet, and that gives me a good place to start off. Google Sheets has a pretty okay chart tool where you can just like take some data, copy and paste it, and can kind of get a rundown of what it looks like. Now, this, compare this to the food dollar. It really depends on which one you think is more useful. I personally don't really like pie charts. I think they're not the prettiest. You can get some insight. Like you can see food services is the biggest category of spending, and that's useful. Yeah, this is okay. But when I am in this position where I have some data that I want to try to gain some insight from, I usually like to use a tool called raw charts. I think that's a little more helpful, has a little more options. It's open source. So I'll just copy this bar graphs. Here we go. You can paste your data and look down here and see a bunch of different options. At first, I was just playing around with different things. I think what I did here was have the percentage be the arc size and the category be the series distribution. Already, I think I prefer this to the percentage pie chart or this iteration of the food dollar. I think if I were to change the color, which I actually did, it becomes like a little more digestible. There are some insights you can gain from this. The fact that food services is the largest is still apparent. Food processing and retail trade is also kind of close, but you can see that retail trade is a little larger. If I were to kind of move on with this direction, I would maybe add in some numbers and make this, this and whatever this is, like let's say 10%. And let's just say retail trade is like 11%. Like this already is kind of a fun looking graph. And if you're trying to insert this chart into a presentation or a blog or whatever, this is just a little more fun to like read. I thought that was pretty chill, but I don't think it's useful enough. And actually, I think what I did was move on then to a bar chart just because that is actually a little more precise. For the bars, I would just do the category and the size should be based on percentage. I'll also color based on the category, and here you have it. Now, this is kind of not the greatest because I would want to resort the bars. I did that. So, and I also added some labels. This is helpful again to maybe more apparently quicker see how much retail trade just slightly edges out of food processing. So that's important. You do also get to know the minimum and maximum, the median, things like that. This data set is pretty simple, so we can't really do it with thousands of entries. You can't make a bar chart, but still, it has its purposes. I thought that was pretty neat. Now, it's neat and actually very useful. And a lot of times, a bar chart is like the right answer when trying to do some data viz. I wanted to be a little more artistic, and I did like the concept of the food dollar. I don't like the implementation, but I like the concept of it. So if we wanted to like try to do something similar, then we would go back to raw graphs. And what I did actually was create something called a tree map. So a tree map is essentially a pie chart, just in a square. That's really what it is. So if I were to do hierarchy, I think it was category, size, color, and let's just do the label. You would get basically a pie chart, just like a little more neatly designed, a little more neat. Now, because I would want to do like a dollar, then I would have to make this longer than taller. So like make this, let's say 1200. That also just allows like the charts to rearrange. And you can get a little crazy with it depending on if you wanted to do this direction, which I don't think you can do with the pie chart. So you can make this very short and kind of make like a bar graph type thing. What I did was just take a base iteration of this, and I ended up actually making something called a food dollar. Now, this is a percentage, if we want to do technical, percentage of US categories of US food spending by percentage. I'm not sure. There's probably a better way to describe it, but anyway, what I did was just take the base version of this, and I moved some stuff around, like because this is a box. You can get a little creative with like how you place these, and if that makes things a little more clear, then I would say go for it, as long as you're not changing the size of everything. And I eventually got here. I will say with this, you don't get as much of a comparison as, let's say, maybe a bar chart. This is definitely a vibes based visualization, but I think vibes based are fun. And actually, what I did with this is highlight some of these charts. Kind of fun, a little more artistic. I really just kind of wanted to like emphasize just the different approaches you can take. I think if you're going for accuracy, then the bar chart might be more your preference. But if you're going on something artistic, something interesting, like I think this retail food dollar is trying to go for, then you can kind of get a little more creative. Okay, so I think that video was not really a tutorial, more so just a look into my life, like a day into the life, and trying to decide like what data is more useful. Hopefully, this was helpful. Peace.